Hello, this is Cheryl Krieger, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the December 15th issue of the Washington Post on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. From the headlines, a Washington Post exclusive. Pentagon plan calls for major power shifts within U.S. military. If adopted, the changes would complement other efforts by the Trump administration to shift resources away from the Middle East and Europe. By Dan Lamothe, Tara Kopp, Nora Robertson, and Alex Horton. Senior Pentagon officials are preparing a plan to downgrade several of the U.S. military's major headquarters and shift the balance of power among its top generals in a major consolidation sought by Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, people familiar with the matter said. If adopted, the plan would usher in some of the most significant changes at the military's highest ranks in decades, in part following through on Hegseth's promise to break the status quo and slash the number of four-star generals in the military. It would reduce in prominence the headquarters of U.S. Central Command, U.S. European Command, and U.S. Africa Command by placing them under the control of a new organization known as U.S. International Command, according to 5 people familiar with the matter. Joint Chiefs Chairman General Dan Kane is expected to detail the proposal, which has not been previously reported, for Hegseth in the coming days. Such moves would complement other efforts by the administration to shift resources from the Middle East and Europe and focus foremost on expanding military operations in the Western Hemisphere, these people said. Like others interviewed for this report, they spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss the effort before it is conveyed to the Secretary. Hegseth's team said in a statement that they would not comment on rumored internal discussions or pre-decisional matters. Any insinuation that there is a divide among officials over the issue is completely false. Everyone in the department is working to achieve the same goal under this administration, the statement said. The Pentagon has shared little to no details with Congress, a lack of communication that has perturbed members of the Republican-led Senate and House Armed Services Committees, according to 2 people familiar with how the panels have prepared for the proposal. Top officers at the commands involved are also awaiting more details, officials said. The plan also calls for realigning U.S. Southern Command and U.S. Northern Command, which oversee military operations throughout the Western Hemisphere, under a new headquarters to be known as U.S. Americas Command, or AMERICOM, people familiar with the matter said. That concept was reported earlier this year by NBC News. Pentagon officials also discussed creating a U.S. Arctic Command that would report to AMERICOM, but that idea appears to have been abandoned, people familiar with the matter said. Combined, the moves would reduce the number of top military headquarters, known as combatant commands, from 11 to 8, while cutting the number of 4-star generals and admirals who report directly to Hegseth. Other remaining combatant commands would be U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, U.S. Cyber Command, U.S. Special Operations Command, U.S. Space Command, U.S. Strategic Command, and U.S. Transportation Command. Those familiar with the plan said it aligns with the Trump administration's national security strategy released this month that declares the days of the United States propping up the entire world order like Atlas are over. The proposal was organized by the Pentagon's Joint Staff under the supervision of Kane and is due to be shared with Hegseth as soon as this week as the preferred course of action among senior military officials. It grew from a request made by Hegseth in the spring to look for ways to improve how troops are commanded and controlled, a senior defense official familiar with the discussion said, adding that Hegseth has kept in touch with Kane about the issue over the past several months. Any changes would need the approval of Hegseth and President Donald Trump. The moves would come in the Pentagon's Unified Command Plan, which lays out the roles of U.S. military's major headquarters. Lawmakers have taken the extraordinary step of requiring the Pentagon to submit a detailed blueprint that describes the realignment's potential costs and impacts on America's alliances. The measure, included in Congress's annual defense policy bill, would withhold money to enact the effort until at least 60 days after the Pentagon provides lawmakers with those materials. The bill has cleared the House and is expected to pass the Senate this week. The senior defense official said the proposed realignment is meant to speed decision-making and adaptation among military commanders. Decay had been observed in how the U.S. military commands and controls troops, he added, suggesting the need for sweeping change is urgent. Time ain't on our side, man, the senior defense official said, describing internal conversations around the plan. The saying here is, if not us, who, and if not now, when? The potential reorganization comes as Hegseth has begun broader efforts to cull the total number of generals and admirals across the military. He has also fired or otherwise forced out more than 20 senior officers, threatened others with polygraph tests to determine whether they have leaked information to the news media, and told those remaining that if they do not like the administration's policies, they should do the honorable thing and resign. Chuck Hagel, who served as Defense Secretary during the Obama administration and as a Republican member of the Senate before that, expressed concerns about the Trump administration's ambitions. There are different dynamics, needs, and security threats throughout the globe, he said. The world isn't getting any less complicated, Hagel said in an interview. You want commands that have the capability of heading off problems before they become big problems, and I think you lose some of that when you unify or consolidate too many. Senior military officials considered about 24 other concepts, the senior defense official said. At least one discussion called for a reduction to 6 total combatant commands. Under that plan, Special Operations Command, Space Command, and Cyber Command would be downgraded and placed under the control of a new U.S. Global Command, said other officials familiar with the discussion. Kane is expected to share at least 2 other courses of action with Hegseth, people familiar with the matter said. One concept called for creating 2 commands to house all of the others, with all major geographic organizations such as Central Command and European Command placed under the control of an entity that would be called Operational Command. Other major headquarters, such as Transportation Command and Space Command, would fall under an organization called Support Command. One proposal called for the creation of a new headquarters unit, Joint Task Force War, to be based at the Pentagon. It would focus on planning and strategy when the United States was not at war and would be capable of controlling forces anywhere in the world when there is a conflict, people familiar with the matter said. The idea didn't test well in exercises with military officials and appears unlikely to be adopted, the senior defense official said. Top military officials expressed concerns that such organization would not possess the same regional expertise and relationships inherent to the military's current construct. Even if you have some of your best people in such a task force, the senior official said, you don't have a fingertip feel for what is occurring in a region. A second official said it seemed very confusing to have top commanders in a region prepare for a conflict there, only to hand those plans over to another commander when something occurred. Another plan sought to reorganize the military by domain, with operations organized and led by whether they occurred on land or in air, sea, space, or cyberspace, people familiar with the matter said. The idea had supporters in the Space Force, but had few other proponents, people familiar with the matter said. It also limited the Marine Corps' influence, without it falling under the control of the Navy Department, even as the other branches of service were elevated. Military officials involved in the reorganization effort also considered whether to elevate the chairman's role to allow him to command forces rather than serving as the senior military advisor to both the President and Defense Secretary. That could have occurred through the Joint Task Force War framework, two officials said, but the concept seemed murky. The idea also could have been complicated by the Goldwater-Nichols Act of 1986, landmark legislation that reorganized the military and defined the chairman's role. Under the law, the chairman is considered the principal military advisor to the president, defense secretary, and other senior officials. Operations are controlled through a chain of command that runs from combatant commanders to the defense secretary to the president. And continuing from the headlines, outrageous. JetBlue pilot describes near collision with Air Force plane off Venezuela. The airline pilot told air traffic control in Caraco that the U.S. military plane was not identifying itself with a transponder. By Hannah Sampson, Meg Kelly, and Alex Horton. A JetBlue pilot changed altitude to avoid colliding with the U.S. Air Force plane in the southern Caribbean on Friday, he told air traffic controllers. The New York-bound flight was leaving the island of Caracal, just north of the Venezuelan coast, when the military aircraft passed directly in our flight path, the JetBlue pilot told an air traffic controller in Caracal, according to audio captured by several sites, including liveatc.net. In audio reviewed by the Washington Post, the airline pilot described the other plane as an air-to-air refueler that was between 2 and 5 miles ahead before it traveled toward Venezuelan airspace. We almost had a mid-air collision up there, the JetBlue pilot said. U.S. military forces have increased their presence off the Venezuelan coast in recent weeks. A person familiar with the incident, who spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss ongoing operations, said the military aircraft was a KC-46 refueling tanker. According to the JetBlue pilot, the refueler was not using a GPS transponder that would have identified its presence. We had to stop our climb, the pilot said. They don't have their transponder turned on. It's outrageous. The air traffic controller in Caracal told JetBlue's pilot that he also did not have the military plane on his scope. We'll do a report on our end too, but they did not have their transponder turned on, so there's no way for you to have seen them, the pilot said. Yes, please, make your report so at least in that case you can get your authorities to be investigating that, the controller told him. According to a JetBlue statement, the airline has reported the situation to federal authorities and would participate in any investigation that follows. Our crew members are trained on proper procedures for various flight situations, and we appreciate our crew for promptly reporting the situation to our leadership team, the statement said. Southern Command, which oversees military operations in Latin America and the Caribbean, is aware of reports regarding U.S. military aircraft in the region and will review the matter, spokesman Colonel Emmanuel L. Ortiz said in a statement. Ortiz did not address questions about whether U.S. air crews have been given special instructions to avoid civilian flight paths, or if they are expected to be especially mindful of commercial aircraft while they are flying with location equipment turned off. Military air crews are highly trained professionals who operate in accordance with established procedures and applicable airspace requirements, Ortiz said. Safety remains a top priority, and we are working through the appropriate channels to assess the facts surrounding the situation. Military air crews commonly turn off their transponders and other tracking equipment for sensitive missions, such as the ongoing counter-narcotic mission in the Caribbean and Eastern Pacific. The Pentagon has deployed a fleet of warships and numerous aircraft, including fighter jets, bombers, and helicopters. Tankers, like the aircraft the JetBlue pilot described, have been heavily used in the Caribbean since September to keep aircraft flying continuously by refueling mid-flight. It is generally the shared responsibility of all pilots and air traffic control to guard against collisions by maintaining awareness and communicating clearly with each other. But the operations in the Caribbean, where the U.S. military aircraft are essentially untraceable on radar when they turn off their tracking equipment, is a unique environment where it is more incumbent on the military to account for commercial aircraft that regularly fly in the region. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Washington Post on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. From the Politics section, MAGA leaders warn Trump the base is checking out. Will he listen? Trump's advisors say he is preparing to hold near-weekly rallies to spend more time with the base, but he has faced criticism from within MAGA in the meantime. By Natalie Allison, Kadia Goba, and Hannah Knowles. As Donald Trump ate his crab cake lunch inside the White House last month, conservative pollster Mark Mitchell tried to explain that there was a disconnect between what the administration seemed to be focused on and what Trump's passionate base of supporters wanted to see. "Sir, you got shot at the Butler rally," Mitchell said, invoking the really strong optics of Trump raising his fist in defiance after the assassination attempt in Pennsylvania in July of 2024. "You said, 'Fight, fight, fight,' but nobody ever clarified what that means," Mitchell continued. "And right now you're fighting Marjorie Taylor Greene and not actually fighting for Americans." The head pollster at Rasmussen Reports warned Trump that many of his supporters believed he hadn't drained the swamp in Washington and suggested that the president refocus with a plan to embrace pragmatic economic populism. To the extent to which we were talking about the economic populism message, he wasn't as interested as I would have hoped, Mitchell said, adding that it was a long-ranging conversation. Mitchell's critique echoes a growing chorus of MAGA faithful raising concerns over what they see as Trump's second-term shortcomings. In recent weeks, pockets of his base, known for its unwavering dedication to Trump and his MAGA agenda, have accused him of focusing too much on foreign affairs, failing to address the cost of living issues he pledged to fix, aligning himself too closely with billionaires and tech moguls, and resisting the release of more investigative files on the deceased sexual predator Jeffrey Epstein. Across the conservative spectrum, a steady drumbeat of commentators has warned that Trump's coalition is weakened and that the party is headed for defeat in midterm elections in November. There are concerns that the base won't show up over frustrations that Trump hasn't pursued the MAGA agenda aggressively enough, and others worry that economic concerns could threaten his standing with independent voters, a key block in the midterms. Trump's top advisors have taken note of the criticism from within MAGA and see it as part of the cyclical feedback the administration will receive throughout his term, as one senior White House official put it. Trump's staff members have planned for him to begin holding near-weekly rallies to tout his accomplishments after spending little time on the stump this year, two officials told The Washington Post, speaking on the condition of anonymity to detail internal conversations. But on his first stop of that effort at a casino in Pennsylvania last week, Trump again mocked the word affordability and played down concerns about rising costs and inflation before acknowledging, "I can't say affordability is a hoax because I agree the prices were too high." His advisors expect that complaints from the base could become louder as the midterms approach, but will subside as more of his policies take effect. Eventually, an advisor quipped, the cycle will restart with a new set of criticisms. Chief among the recent critics has been Greene, Republican Georgia, whose complaints led to Trump disavowing her last month. She subsequently decided to resign from Congress. "I'm an early indicator. I'm like a bellwether," said Greene, who stood by Trump during his political exile after the January 6, 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol, and has prided herself on being closely attuned to Trump's base. "I say it, and then within 4 to 6 months, everyone's saying the same thing." In an interview with the Post, Greene said most of Trump's longtime supporters still want to see him succeed, but the base is jaded. They know that what they elected him to do, she said, and they're aware he's not doing it. Driving 80 miles an hour at a brick wall. Public polling has shown mixed signals about how much Trump's support has slipped among Republicans. He maintains support from the vast majority of the party, though recent polling shows he has dipped below the usual 90% approval mark, but his approval rating overall has lagged in recent weeks. It reached its worst with voters in late November and has ticked up slightly since, though it remains lower than at this point in his first term. An Economist YouGov poll conducted this month found that 41% of Americans approve of the job Trump is doing and 55% disapprove, a net improvement of 5 percentage points from a week earlier. That apparent softness has coincided with some Republican pushback against aspects of the Trump agenda, including when GOP state senators in Indiana last week blocked a White House-led effort to redraw the state's congressional maps. And on Thursday, 20 Republicans in Congress joined Democrats in another rebuke, supporting a bill that would overturn Trump's executive order limiting union rights for federal workers. What remains to be seen is whether that brewing dissatisfaction will grow or whether Trump can more aggressively focus on issues that quiet the discontent. He said Tuesday that his remaining 3 years in office amount to an eternity in Trump time to carry out his agenda. Still, the chorus of supporters willing to speak out has become louder. Mitchell was invited to the White House by Vice President J.D. Vance, who follows him on X, and has communicated with him about polling in recent months. Before lunch with Trump, Mitchell met with Vance, White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles, and Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Mitchell is not part of the president's political operation, but Trump's advisors were interested in hearing his outside perspective, a White House official told the Post. Mitchell said in an interview that Trump listened to his concerns and asked questions, but eventually pivoted to one of his favorite conversation topics, golf. He gushed about two of his golf partners, Senator Lindsey Graham, Republican South Carolina, and Fox News host Bret Baier, both of whom are subjects of MAGA faction ire. Trump also bragged about how much money he had raised during a golf fundraiser for Graham the weekend before, a day after he declared that he was rescinding his support for Green. Mitchell suggested that it would have been better for the administration to acknowledge early on that repairing the economy would take significant changes and would not occur overnight. The very first thing they shouldn't have done is lower gas prices $1 and then say, "The golden age is here," he said. Green also believes that Trump is missing an opportunity to connect with his base on affordability. People understand that it takes time to stabilize the economy, she said, but they take issue with Trump's claims that concerns about affordability are part of a Democratic hoax. No, it's not, and the healthcare situation is serious. It's dire, and Republicans are only just now taking it serious, Green said, referring to expiring healthcare subsidies that will cause insurance prices to surge for Americans enrolled in the Affordable Care Act plans. This is a country driving 80 miles an hour at a brick wall on January 1, when the subsidies expire. Punchy tweets, cool video edits, no follow-through. Savannah Hernandez, a conservative commentator who serves as a Turning Point USA contributor, described the second Trump term so far as underwhelming, while crediting Trump with making positive, lasting changes to the conservative movement. She was among the influencers the White House assembled for an Antifa roundtable with Trump in October to discuss how to stop a loosely knit movement of far-left activists who have at times incited violence during protests. But on that and a host of other issues Trump's base cares about, including the administration's goal to deport more than 1 million undocumented immigrants this year, which it is not expected to reach, accountability for what it believes were government agencies being weaponized against conservatives, and vows to make life more affordable, Hernandez said he has fallen short. All we've really seen is punchy tweets, cool video edits, but really no follow-through on any of the promises, she said of the messaging coming from the White House. And if he listened to his base, and he was connected to us, even just through social media, you would see that the average person is still struggling to buy groceries, that the housing crisis is still on the mind of everybody, that inflation is still a really big issue. And when Americans see billions of dollars going overseas to any country, it really feels like a betrayal when we're struggling here at home, Hernandez said. Two senior White House officials said Trump has shown a range of feedback from MAGA commentators, including criticism about his performance on nearly a daily basis. In a statement, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt called Trump the proud founder and undisputed leader of MAGA, the greatest political movement in American history. President Trump is delivering on his core campaign promises across the board, keeping his word to the nearly 80 million patriots who elected him in a landslide and fighting every day to make America greater than ever before, she said. Other MAGA-aligned voices downplayed the extent to which criticism within the movement is a warning sign. Jack Posobiec, a longtime activist and conservative media figure, described Trump's second-term performance as light years beyond his first term. You will always have this sliver of people. It's a very online group of people, a very active group of people who would say they want more, they want more, they want more, he said in an interview, and I get that. Isabel Brown, another conservative podcaster, said the complaints from within MAGA are a signal of a healthy conservative debate. Populist voices urge Trump to course correct. In Georgia, 36-year-old Jessie Meadows, a Trump voter who describes herself as MAGA, grew frustrated this year as prices remained high and the president responded dismissively to the push to release more Epstein files. Her disappointment hardened as Trump attacked Green and Representative Thomas Massie, Republican Kentucky, who also pushed for the release of the files. Trump's post touting favorable polls and success bringing down inflation seemed like his own version of fake news, Meadows said. She voted for Democratic candidates in Public Service Commission elections in Georgia in November that flipped the seats from the GOP, and she said that going forward, she will back candidates she considers America first, regardless of party. If I had known what Trump was going to turn into now, I would have stayed home, Meadows said. Many supporters like her have been turned off by seeing what was once a full calendar of rallies in Middle America replaced with opulent events with business leaders, deal signings with billionaires, and travel abroad. While meeting with Trump, Mitchell told him that his base wanted to see him smash the oligarchy, not be the oligarchy. Building billionaire-funded ballrooms and jet-setting around the world and trillion-dollar investment deals look a lot like oligarchy stuff, Mitchell said. Despite acknowledging Trump's departures from his base on such issues as foreign and tech policy, some populist voices in his movement insist he is course-correcting to win back support ahead of the midterms. Trump is pivoting into a much harder populist nationalist stance on deportations, drug cartels, third world fraud, tariffs, said Stephen K. Bannon, his former advisor turned influential talk show host. It's only harder from here to November 2026, Bannon, who has been outspoken against efforts by wealthy tech executives to influence Trump's policies, told The Post. Brogliarchs didn't sign up for the wet work of modern politics. They will be the first off the bus. MAGA influencers have cringed at some Trump comments they view as out of touch with his base, especially his assertion on Fox News that the United States needs foreign workers because it does not have enough talented people. Not long after, Trump acknowledged that his base wasn't happy with his decision to welcome foreign tech workers to the country, but said his poll numbers would go up among smart people. Raheem Kassam, a British right-wing political strategist living in Washington, who is editor of the conservative National Pulse, said his phone lit up with complaints when Trump made the poll comment. I'm just saying, listen to the people that elected you, because right now, apart from the deportation stuff, you're not really connecting with them, Kassam said. In response to a request for comment from the White House, in addition to Leavitt, Vance provided the Post with a statement touting a reduction in the number of illegal immigrants in the country and Trump's work with pharmaceutical companies to lower drug prices for some Americans, among other accomplishments. Is there more work to do? Of course there is, Vance said, and no one is more committed to doing that than the President of the United States and his team. Other Trump supporters said that, although not everything has panned out as they hoped, they remained confident about the president. "He is not a king," said Jerry Ramsey, 81, from Marietta, Georgia. "He can't just say, 'You got to cut the price of a hamburger.' Within another year, I think things will be rocking on pretty good." You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Washington Post on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. From the War in Ukraine section. U.S. offers Ukraine security guarantee in bid to strike peace deal. Ukrainian leaders said Monday they appreciated White House efforts to reach a deal, even as significant gaps appeared to remain between the sides. By Michael Birnbaum, Kate Brady, and David L. Stern. U.S. and Ukrainian officials said Monday that Washington had pledged to protect Ukraine against further Russian attack, potentially easing the paths to Kyiv's signing on to a truce, even as major questions about territory and Russia's willingness to agree to a deal remained unresolved. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said Monday that he had made progress over 2 days of conversations in Berlin with top White House envoys trying to end Russia's war in Ukraine, saying that Washington had offered security guarantees akin to those of the NATO Defense Alliance as Kyiv entered a crucial week of high-stakes talks with its backers. "Things are seemingly going well, but we've been saying that for a long time, and it's a difficult one," President Donald Trump said Monday in the Oval Office after a conversation with Zelensky and other European leaders. "We have to get them on the same page, but I think that's working." Ukrainian, U.S., and top European officials met in Berlin on Sunday and Monday to try to advance a peace deal as Russia continues to bombard Ukrainian cities. Trump has urged Ukraine to hand over territory that Russia has not yet conquered as the price for peace, even while Putin has demanded additional concessions to weaken Kyiv's sovereignty. Ukrainian leaders said Monday they appreciated White House efforts to reach a deal, even as significant gaps appeared to remain between the sides. Russian President Vladimir Putin has said in the past that he is likely to oppose a deal that would grant major U.S. security guarantees to Kyiv. We have now heard from the American side that they are prepared to give security guarantees that are equivalent to Article 5 of the NATO partners, Zelensky said at a Monday news conference, referring to the element of NATO treaties that commits members to treat an attack on one country as an attack on them all. Zelensky spoke after hours of meetings with White House envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law. "The U.S. guarantees are just a first step," Zelensky said. U.S. officials said Monday they had offered platinum security guarantees to Ukraine that would require a vote by Congress. They said that they believed they had solved 90% of the issues between Ukraine and Russia. But the U.S. officials offered no details about what form the security guarantees would take, other than that there would be no U.S. boots on the ground in Ukraine. Seeing as the United States is unwilling to shoulder the risk of taking Ukraine into NATO because of concerns about being pulled into a direct war with Russia, it is unclear why it would be willing to offer separate security guarantees as robust as those of NATO. U.S. officials also said that Ukraine and Russia would talk directly with each other about the fate of the contested territory in eastern Ukraine, a sign that they did not see an immediate path to a negotiated compromise. Zelensky and other Ukrainian officials praised the U.S. involvement in the negotiations, and U.S. and European officials said they would do what they could to reassure Ukrainians that they would not be left alone should Russia attack again after a peace deal. Ukraine would be able to defend itself in the long term, not only on its own, but also with the support of the states allied with Ukraine, and that is good news, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz told reporters alongside Zelensky. European Union leaders will gather in Brussels on Thursday to discuss a plan to issue loans against $220 billion in Russian assets that were frozen after the 2022 invasion of Ukraine that could help finance Kyiv's weapons purchases and the reconstruction of the devastated country. But Belgium, whose financial institutions hold much of the money, has been staunchly opposed to the plan, and a U.S. vision for a peace deal envisions a different use for the funds by using them for joint U.S. investments in Ukraine, pitting Washington against many European leaders. Trump and his top officials have said they hope to achieve a peace deal by the end of the year, a timeline that Ukrainian and European officials have suggested is ambitious. Zelensky has been facing a major corruption scandal at home and was forced to dismiss his powerful chief of staff, Andriy Yermak, after Yermak's home was raided as part of the investigation. That domestic vulnerability, along with painful Russian attacks on Ukrainian energy infrastructure that have left Kyiv and other cities in increasingly long stretches of darkness and cold, may make Zelensky more ready to strike a deal, one senior European diplomat said. I do believe they have never been as serious as we are right now, and somehow the feeling is that this has to do with the whole scandal on corruption and the whole domestic mess as well, the diplomat said, speaking on the condition of anonymity to speak frankly about the situation. But the diplomat expressed skepticism about whether Russia was willing to agree to peace. People in this country are quite realistic about the ways to bring this war to its end, the diplomat said. They believe that as long as Russia feels it has an upper hand in this whole process, there is no chance to move to a really sustainable peace. Trump last week spoke by phone to Zelensky and other European leaders about the peace deal in a conversation that both sides said was difficult. But he dispatched Witkoff and Kushner to Berlin to meet with Zelensky and others to try to keep negotiations going. The president once said that he could end the war between Russia and Ukraine in less than 24 hours, and has since confessed his frustration that resolving the conflict has proved more complicated. Trump on Monday spoke again to Zelensky and Merz, calling into the dinner that included the two leaders in Berlin. Washington is offering really, really strong guarantees, Article 5-like, said one U.S. official familiar with the discussions, who spoke to reporters on the condition of anonymity under White House ground rules. Washington wants Russia to get back into the global economy so that they have incentive not to go back to war in the future, the official said. Russia was integrated into the global economy before its invasion of Ukraine. There's no such thing as permanent allies or permanent enemies, the official said. From the elections section, the Democrat testing the appetite for a leader from the 1%. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker has tapped his wealth to climb the political ladder, moving toward a White House run while presenting himself as a champion for everyday people. By Maeve Reston, Springfield, Illinois. On a late summer afternoon at the Illinois State Fairgrounds, hundreds of Democrats sipped cold beer from clear plastic J.B. party cups as they waited under a large tent to hear their governor's fiery populist attacks on President Donald Trump's agenda. Cutting a broad figure in a casual short-sleeved button-down, J. Robert J.B. Pritzker, 60, thundered from the stage about Medicaid, Medicare, voting rights, civil rights, and food assistance, accusing Trump and his party of demolishing the social safety net. MAGA Republicans are trying to take away everything that matters to working families, said Pritzker, who is seeking a third term next year. Are you ready for the fight? Left unsaid by Pritzker that day in August, he is the wealthiest office holder in the United States, other than Trump, as a scion of the Hyatt Hotels family with a personal fortune worth $3.9 billion, according to Forbes. For years, Pritzker has bankrolled an array of liberal causes and his own political career at a nearly unrivaled clip, pouring more than $508 million into state and federal elections since 2015, including at least $348 million for his campaigns. Pritzker's personal fortune has given him a ready-made war chest that has powered his ascent as a Democratic donor, candidate, and office holder during the past 3 decades, a close examination of his career shows. His money opened doors to elite fundraising circles and close relationships with Hillary Clinton and other powerful Democrats, instantly turned on a cash spigot in his first run for governor, endeared him to abortion rights activists as he cut checks for ballot measures in a raft of states, and covered the costs of travel on private jets, all without the time-consuming task of dialing other wealthy patrons to donate to him. To some, that makes him an avatar of a problematic combination of money and politics. Many other Democrats argue that his wealth has given him the freedom to champion policies that benefit everyday people without the constraints of owing favors to donors. For years, Pritzker has fended off rivals in both parties who've portrayed him as a trust fund baby who has been buying off elected officials by presenting himself as an advocate for the working class. Now he is using that strategy to lay a foundation for what could be his most ambitious political endeavor yet, a run for president in 2028. As he forcefully challenges Trump's agenda on immigration, redistricting, domestic military deployments, and the economy, Pritzker is testing his party's appetite for a leader from the same 1% that many have railed against in recent years. While Democrats have a history of falling in love with charismatic aristocrats who take up the cause of the poor, including Franklin D. Roosevelt and Robert F. Kennedy, this might be a different moment. Left-wing Democrats have increasingly villainized wealth, with Senator Bernie Sanders, independent Vermont, blaming the oligarchy for the country's ills and arguing billionaires shouldn't even exist, a position fellow Democratic socialist Zohran Mamdani, the mayor-elect of New York, has adopted. The party that has spent years accusing Trump and his wealthy allies of self-dealing is searching for ways to reconnect with working-class voters that it has lost to Trump's America First appeals. I can't see how a billionaire would be a good person to represent this entire country, said Carmen Borgia, 26, a graphic designer who carried a sign that said, "No such thing as an ethical billionaire," at an anti-Trump No Kings rally this fall in Washington. She said she could not support a presidential candidate with that much wealth. They can't relate to most Americans. It's just something I am passionate about. Other Democrats see Pritzker as the answer to Trump's brand of populism. He's got a really good opportunity to show that not all billionaires are bad, said Democratic strategist Joe Casio, a former aide for both of Sanders' presidential campaigns. Pritzker has for years sought to deflect concerns about his wealth, using a repertoire of self-deprecating lines, a folksy Midwestern persona, an embrace of raising taxes on the rich to help middle-class people, and sharp counterpunches. One of his biggest applause lines at the 2024 Democratic National Convention in Chicago, which he helped land for the city after promising Democratic officials that the more than $80 million affair would be debt-free, was that the audience should take it from an actual billionaire that Trump was rich in only one thing: stupidity. He drew laughter at a more intimate Nevada delegation breakfast that week after telling delegates that few Illinois voters were looking for a white Ukrainian American Jewish billionaire to be their candidate when he first ran for governor in the 2018 election. A belief in kindness and empathy in government, Pritzker argues, distinguishes him from Trump and his wealthiest allies. He points to his push for policies such as forgiving up to $1 billion in medical debt for working-class families and raising his state's minimum wage to $15 an hour as examples of fighting for those who need it. That record, I think, belies the idea that every billionaire is a terrible person or is working against the interest of average working folks, Pritzker said in a March interview with the Washington Post. Your policies have to be about the people who need government the most. That appeal is being tested as Pritzker introduces himself outside Illinois as one of the most forceful critics of Trump. His pitch has done little to quell the criticism of activists who have raised concerns about the intermingling of money and politics and the barriers less privileged people face to entering public office. There's very few people who can afford to spend even a fraction of the money that Pritzker spent on his campaigns, said Alyssa Kaplan, executive director of Reform for Illinois, a group that advocates for greater transparency and public financing in elections. You really want a system where that's your pool of talent for your representatives? I think it's dangerous, she said, because even if you have this exception of the quote-unquote good billionaire, it's not a good basis for a political system. Early exposure to business and politics. In the Pritzker family lore, the Illinois governor's great-grandfather looms large. Nicholas Pritzker emigrated from Ukraine to the U.S. in 1881 when he was 10, after he, his father, and his brother Abram fled the pogroms targeting Jews in Eastern Europe, according to Pritzker's account of an unpublished family history written by his great-grandfather. For their first 8 to 9 months in Chicago, the family eked out a mere existence, and the 10-year-old boy slept many nights in the LaSalle Street tunnel, avoiding the cold by packing newspapers around my feet, legs, and wrists, Nicholas Pritzker wrote in another description. That passage was included in a history of the family that a distant Pritzker cousin published in 1962. There's no doubt that I was one of the luckiest people alive, Pritzker said in a summer interview in the black walnut-paneled library of the historic Governor's Mansion in Springfield, which he and his wife helped restore with $850,000 of their own money. But it really grounds you when you understand that you came from a family that arrived here with nothing, that it wasn't always like this. Nicholas Pritzker began his career shining shoes and selling newspapers, ultimately going to law school and starting a law firm that his children expanded through the generations into a thriving real estate and manufacturing enterprise, according to court documents and news reports. In 1957, Pritzker's uncle, Jay Pritzker, bought a motel near the Los Angeles International Airport. Pritzker's parents, Donald and Sue Pritzker, moved the family to California to run it. A year later, Pan Am began flying Boeing 707s, ushering in the jet age of business travel. The Pritzkers expanded into other hotels near airports, laying the foundation for what would become the Hyatt Hotels empire. Pritzker was from an early age a close observer of his parents' business pursuits, recalling how his mother immersed herself in the design of each hotel, from the experience each guest had walking through the door to the hospitality services offered to VIPs. At home, the family living room was a hub of liberal social and political activity during the 1970s, when his parents welcomed guests including Nancy Pelosi, Jerry Brown, and Barbara Boxer, he said. Pritzker, the youngest child, said he often accompanied his mother to rallies and meetings in the 70s as she advocated for abortion rights and gay rights. He remembers her sitting, him and his siblings, Penny and Anthony, assembly line style, at the dining room table to stuff envelopes with political literature, seal them, and stamp them. Tragedy struck when Pritzker was 7. His father died of a heart attack at 39 after playing tennis. His mother struggled with alcoholism and depression after losing her husband, Pritzker said. She was in and out of treatment, and he recalled waiting up some nights to pry the lit cigarette from his mother's hand after she fell asleep. While Pritzker was away at boarding school, his mother died 10 years after her husband's death, when she leaped from a moving cab of a truck that was towing her Cadillac, according to news reports from the time. Pritzker went on to major in political science at Duke University and got an early taste of campaigning in North Carolina while he was still in school as a logistics aide for the U.S. Senate campaign of Terry Sanford, a former governor who had served as Duke's president. Mark Pohl, a North Carolina contemporary who became close friends with Pritzker and would later manage his first run for office, recalled how Pritzker threw himself into the work, driving his Saab from one end of the state to the other, gathering the concerns of North Carolina voters so he could brief Sanford before each event. After Sanford won his Senate seat, Pritzker worked in Washington as his legislative assistant. He met his wife, Mary Catherine, who came from a prominent Democratic South Dakota political family and is known as MK, on a 1988 blind lunch date at a cafe in the U.S. Capitol complex while he was working for then-Senator Alan Dixon, Democrat of Illinois, and she was working for then-Senator Tom Daschle, Democrat of South Dakota, according to a Pritzker spokesperson. Pritzker showed a continued interest in politics, founding Democratic Leadership for the 21st Century, a group that was focused on bringing more young leaders into Democratic politics in 1991, while he was a student at Northwestern University School of Law. The Internet was taking off in 1993 when Pritzker graduated, and in 1996 he started New World Ventures, a tech-focused venture capital firm that focused in part on Chicago-based startups. He avoided taking a job in the family business, inspired, he said, by his father's example of striking out on his own. In 1997, when the incumbent retired in Illinois' 9th Congressional District, which included the north side of Chicago and had a significant Jewish population, Pritzker saw an opportunity. He entered the 1998 race at 32 with long odds, facing two Democratic opponents with more established political networks. Republican Jan Sakakowski was then a state representative, and Pritzker's other main rival, Howard Carroll, was a state senator. Because the Pritzker family business and the Hyatt Hotel Corporation had headquartered in Chicago, and because the family was involved in philanthropic endeavors, many voters revered the Pritzker name. Pritzker, however, quickly encountered critics skeptical of his thin resume. Tom Menard, who managed Carroll's campaign, recalled a forum in which a student quizzed Pritzker about why internships in Washington qualified him to be a member of Congress. Pritzker also found himself questioning whether people were in it because they wanted to be in the gravitational pull of a Pritzker or because they were truly loyal to him, according to Poole, who recalled receiving some asks that were off-putting to Pritzker. There'd be a group that would come to us and say, "We'd like to honor your candidate as Man of the Year, and it's only going to cost you $50,000, Poole said. We were trying to cut into what we knew were difficult dynamics with the race, without being seen as buying the election. Pritzker raised about $660,000 for his campaign and lent nearly $1.2 million of his own money to the effort, according to campaign finance records. But Menard said the other two rival campaigns never felt overwhelmed by Pritzker's spending and were surprised that his campaign did not go on air with television ads sooner than they did. Pritzker finished third in the Democratic primary with a little over 20% of the vote. Inexperience was the central hurdle for Pritzker, Menard said. There was a sense that Congress, as the first office that he was running for, it was a bit of a reach, he said. Menard's former colleague on Carroll's campaign argued that Pritzker's wealth has, beginning with that first race, shaped voters' image of him more than anything else. The primary selling point of J.B. Pritzker, when he first ran for the offices that he ran for in challenger races, was that he has money, said Dave Sirota, who was a researcher for the Carroll campaign and later served as advisor to Sanders' presidential campaign. It was like, oh, he's the guy who did X, or he's carrying the torch for this or that cause. It was like, he's the guy who can write an unlimited check. Does anybody want a wealthy guy on the Democratic side? After the loss, Pritzker focused on his venture firm as he and his wife became influential figures in Chicago's philanthropic circles. The 1999 death of the family patriarch, his Uncle Jay, led to the division of the family assets, a lengthy legal process that began in 2001 and ended about 2011. Each of the 11 Pritzker cousins, including JB, inherited $1.3 billion, according to court documents. He has nearly tripled that fortune, according to his net worth as tracked by Forbes. As a couple, the Pritzkers founded the Pritzker Family Foundation in 2001 and put their money into efforts to improve early childhood education and other causes, which raised their profile in Democratic circles. M.K. Pritzker became well known for her advocacy for the rights of women in the criminal justice system. The Pritzkers also advocated for a state assault weapons ban that Pritzker would later sign as governor in 2023. Politics continued to interest Pritzker. He was an early supporter of Hillary Clinton in the 2008 campaign, at a time when many of his state's most prominent political Democrats, including his sister Penny Pritzker, were lining up behind then-Senator Barack Obama of Illinois. The Pritzkers had bonded with Clinton, then a senator from New York, in 2006, after they were connected by a mutual friend and offered to host a fundraiser for her re-election campaign at their home in Evanston, according to his spokesman. During the event, Pritzker was surprised by how his young daughter was captivated by Clinton, according to an aide familiar with his thinking. As he walked Clinton out, she asked to say goodbye to his daughter, kneeling down at eye level to talk to her and hug her, the aide said. Clinton asked Pritzker to serve as national co-chair for her 2008 presidential campaign. When Clinton ran a second time in 2016, Pritzker and his wife were some of the largest donors to her effort, giving more than $17.5 million, including over $15 million to an allied super PAC. The size of the investment was made possible by a Supreme Court decision that erased limits on contributions to political committees that make independent expenditures, empowering wealthy financiers such as Pritzker. On the night Trump defeated Clinton, Pritzker and his wife were surrounded by stunned Clinton supporters at her gathering at the Javits Center in New York. While some said they were swearing off politics, Pritzker recalled being even more determined to stay involved. Howard Wolfson, a longtime advisor to former New York mayor and presidential campaign candidate Mike Bloomberg, a billionaire who self-funded his short-lived 2020 Democratic presidential campaign, predicted that Pritzker's wealth will be a barrier for some voters. But he added, in a time when there is an enormous amount of corruption in government and concerns about special interest power, the idea that you have somebody who is free and clear of that is potentially very attractive to some people. Trump, who has built a national movement with many working-class supporters, has frequently attacked Pritzker, insulting his weight during the annual White House turkey pardoning and suggesting earlier in the fall that he should be in jail for his treatment of federal immigration agents. This summer, when Trump first talked about deploying the National Guard in Chicago, Pritzker called the president a bully with dementia. He mocked Trump's dark descriptions of his state by playing the role of vest-wearing combat zone correspondent, reporting from war-torn Chicago on Jimmy Kimmel Live. Terry Ritchie, a 65-year-old retired university employee from Carbondale, Illinois, said she initially had no interest in backing just another gazillionaire, but ended up volunteering for Pritzker's gubernatorial campaigns. He's not in it for the money. He's already got the money, Ritchie said in an interview at a Pritzker campaign event this summer as he launched his re-election bid. The first time Ritchie heard him speak, Pritzker told the crowd that the good thing about having a lot of money was that he was not beholden to anyone. That's what sold me, she said. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the December 15th issue of the Washington Post. Your reader has been Cheryl. Thank you for listening.